Before I could say anything, she dragged me into an alleyway. Right there in the dark. Alice was your typical high school girl, the type you'd have a one-night fling with, according to my friends at least. I was no romantic, but I admit I'd always dreamed of having a girlfriend someday. I was surprised when she came to me one day, putting a note into my locker. I caught her in the act, and she just shyly gave it to me instead. Head bowed, she asked me out on a date, and that's where it all started. For the first month, it was a dream come true. She doted on me at every corner, and I got to know her a lot better. Alice was the daughter of a wealthy CEO, and had never had a relationship before on account of her strict lifestyle. She was a public figure, confident and bright. That was true for the most part. She always ranked in the top 10 for academics, but I noticed she didn't have many friends. I even overheard some girls talking about how creepy she was. I dismissed it, thinking it was typical gossip. Every lunchtime, we'd go on the rooftop and feed each other like some sort of cliché anime couple. I didn't mind it. If she was happy, then I was happy. Our relationship took a step further when we shared a kiss on the bridge to school. At that moment, I didn't care about anything else. Alice was a wonderful girl, and I would never leave her side. One day during school, while I was laying on my desk daydreaming, I felt a hand ruffle my hair. Before me was Yasmin. I'd actually known her for a long time, ever since we were 5. But when high school started, I saw her less and less, and I had basically forgotten about her until now. I walked home without Alice for the first time. Instead, Yasmin and I caught up, and we shared a lot of laughs. Then she asked me if I was happy with my relationship. We stopped. Before I could say anything, she dragged me into an alleyway. Right there in the dark, arms wrapped around my waist, and face burrowed into my chest. She cried. She begged me to break up with Alice, and about how much she missed me. My shirt became damp with her tears. I stood there in utter shock and terror as Yasmin revealed all the truth about Alice. And that was when I realized it was too good to be true. Why would such a perfect girl like her ever date a guy like me? I felt completely horrified and betrayed by Alice. I had to end the relationship. After that, me and Yasmin parted ways back to our houses. I reached my house an hour later. It was winter and getting dark quickly. I shivered as I entered my house. I was cold, but I'm sure Yasmin wasn't. I smiled as I remembered wrapping my scarf around her. My parents were out for the night, so I retired to my bedroom. The window was open, curtains billowing and drifting. And there on my bed, curled up into a ball, was Alice, in a nightgown. She looked quite literally like a ghost. I approached and sat down beside her. Inside, my heart raced. How the hell did she get in? I brushed aside her loose strands of hair. She faced me. I doubled back, falling onto the floor.
Do you think I'm beautiful yet?
She had the face of Yasmin, quite literally. She had taken her face. Folds of skin and holes where the eyes would have been. I stammered, looking for the words. She stood looming over me, blood dripping onto the floor. I felt a stab into my thigh. I cried out, but Alice held a hand to my mouth. I felt my struggling fade away. My arms weren't reacting anymore.
I loved you for so long,
she whispered into my ear. My hair bristled.
I've been looking at you since kindergarten, longer than Yasmin ever did.
I tried speaking, but my throat was constricted.
You'll love me too.
I felt my finger being lifted. Then Alice put a ring on it.
Till death do us part.
My parents never made it back home. Her parents spent millions covering up the whole thing. And today's my wedding. I smile fakely at the altar. And coming from the altar, she glides down. But whenever I look at her, I see only Yasmin's face, and what could have been. If only she had warned me sooner. Playing Among Us was something I normally did with my friends, calling over Discord and making our own game modes, overall having a fun time. Over time though, they got bored and stopped playing, until me and another friend were the only ones even remotely interested in the game. However, we wouldn't let that get in the way of having fun. On the off chance we were both imposters, we would cause mayhem, and we often played beyond midnight. One day, I joined a call with him and began looking for a server that wasn't full. Hey Peter, do you feel like playing tonight?
I don't know, man. I'm pretty tired. Maybe 1 or 2 games.
Not gonna lie, I was pretty disappointed, but I didn't let it show, cause if Peter stopped playing, then I would be a loner. An idea came to my head. Hey, you remember that guy who was talking about room 666?
That's just a stupid story, Joe.
Come on, let's at least try it. There was a pause before he finally spoke.
Fine.
I booted up the game and entered the private code, 666. To my non-surprise, it didn't work. Yo, did it work for you?
Nope. Now we look like idiots. I'm going to sleep now.
With that, Peter disconnected, and I was left alone. I kept trying to join, spamming the button, the box wiggling as it denied every press. Even I didn't feel in the mood anymore. I was about to disconnect and call it a night, when the distinctive noise of someone joining the game sounded. I was in, but there was also someone else already there. His color was red, and he wore nothing. His username? Cruciatus. I typed a message. Hi. There was no reply. I circled around him trying to get his attention. Was he AFK? You there? I went over to the in-game settings. Each option to change was blank. I thought I had stumbled upon a glitch or something, maybe a part of the game I wasn't meant to be in. Peter tried joining and it hadn't worked, so why had it worked for me? Are you there? I said aloud. This was a habit of mine. I would say my messages before typing them. Before I could even send it, he replied.
I am here.
Did you type in 666 as well?
No.
Then how did you get in?
Wanna play around?
You can't play around with only 2 people, dummy.
Watch me.
The game started all of a sudden, but there was no familiar mark of the shh. It just jumped straight into it. A very, very faint lullaby could be heard. Normally all the players would start off around the middle table, and we'd all rush off to do our tasks. This time it was only me. I didn't have a red username, ruling me out as the imposter, but it was as if I was in practice mode. My screen was empty from the typical tasks, pause button, and the map. There was one objective to the top left corner: survive. At this point, I couldn't help but start laughing. Was this supposed to be some sort of half-assed joke? If this was Peter's doing, which I suspected it was, he put a bit too much effort into this. I decided to play into it rather than stop there. He had put in the hard work, so the least I could do was pretend to be scared. I went to the left corridors and began making my way down to electrical. I was confused as I kept walking and walking and walking. The same corridor and paths to the engines and security went flying by. It was like I was in a loop of some sort. Was my speed turned down or something? After about another minute, I decided to swerve into security. And there was Cruciatus. Knowing there were only 2 people in the game, I put 2 and 2 together and was not surprised when he stabbed my in-game character. The kill animation played out, and on the last stab, I felt a jolt of electricity in my back. A pinprick, just about 1,000,000 times worse. I gasped out in pain, looking at my chair for whatever could have hurt that bad. Nothing. I looked back at the screen. We were back in the lobby. Cruciators had typed something.
Wanna play around?
Peter, what the hell was that?
Watch me.
We were thrown back in the game, same format, and I wasn't the imposter again. Instead of making my way to the left, I went down the center corridor. My back began aching, but I ignored it. As expected, it seemed endless. There was a detail I'd almost missed. My blue character was a little stained almost, small flecks of red across him. I ignored it and kept walking. After a while, I turned into the admin room. Once again, Cruciators was there, and he went after me. I died once again, my character having his neck snapped. All of a sudden, I started getting a splitting headache, throbs of pain over and over. The game restarted. I tried to call Peter, but there was no answer. Cruciators was waiting for me in the lobby. Dude, I'm not feeling well. Gotta go.
You aren't going anywhere.
What? I'm going now. See ya. I tried to switch off my PC, but it refused to. I frowned and looked back at the screen. Man, I don't feel like playing anymore.
Watch me.
The round started again. My character was even more grotesque now, his head limp and covered in blood. Seriously, he had put way too much effort into this. I decided to play along one last time and headed right instead. This time, there were no endless corridors to go down. It was perfectly normal from what I could see. The weapons, CO2, navigation, they were all fine. And then I went to the communications room. Plastered on every wall were just the words, I know. Cruciators came from behind and killed my character, the screen turning off the instant he did so. I sat there for a while. I noticed my left hand was starting to shake uncontrollably. Then I heard whispered words close to my ear.
Watch me.
I've always looked forward to my birthday, not because of the balloons, or the presents, or the cake, but because I liked having one day a year where people made me feel loved and appreciated. My therapist told me that one of the best ways to keep on top of my depression was to have small things to look forward to, so this year I set my birthday as my goal. What followed was a very hard year. I lost my dad and my job around the same time, both due to the coronavirus. The next several months were a blur of medical bills, funeral costs, repossessions, eviction notices, and government benefits. I eventually found work cleaning a slaughterhouse, but even with Victoria's second job, we were barely scraping by. Through it all, I held on tightly to my hope that my birthday would make all the pain and hardship worth it, even when the pills ran out and we couldn't afford a new prescription. Just one happy day, that's all I needed. After what felt like forever, the day was finally here. I got up with a start and headed to the kitchen for breakfast, but just as I entered, Victoria was rushing out our daughter Claudia out the door to school. I called out after them, asking if anything important was on today.
Yeah, your turn for the laundromat after work,
Yelled Victoria, pulling Claudia behind her as she tried to say goodbye. The door slammed before she got the chance. I really did try to stay positive. On breaks from cleaning out the septic tank at work, I tried organising drinks, but my workmates and friends were all busy. I kept trying to connect to the crappy Wi-Fi to check Facebook, but it would never connect long enough to load. I even tried calling my mum on the way home from work, but she kept going through to voicemail. When I got off the bus, my phone finally rang, but it was just the finance company giving me our third final warning on our loan. That's it. I was done. I got home to a dark apartment. I didn't care anymore. It was probably better that they weren't home to see this. I grabbed a small wooden box from the hallway cupboard and slumped down at the kitchen table. Sobbing, I pulled out Dad's old service revolver and put the barrel in my mouth. I was about to pull the trigger when I noticed something in the living room. A small flickering light was hovering in the dark. I couldn't quite make out what it was through the tears in my eyes. It looked like a face was being dimly lit behind the light. Was that Claudia? Suddenly, the lights flicked on, and in a panic, I flinched. I only had a chance to hear one word being shouted by the room full of people before the back of my head exploded. I just want my mum, I shouted. I knew it wouldn't do me any good. It's the same thing. I wake up, it's the dead of night. I cry out and want my mum, just to hear her voice, to have her soothe me, run her fingers through my hair, tell me everything will be alright. I don't remember how I lost her. I just know I was taken in the night, separated from her, ripped from my bed in the dead of night by the creatures that now torment me. Instead, I get this. No help, no relief. I'm always scared. Every time I cry out, the creatures come. It's not many. They have humanoid-like shapes to them, but long sharp claws, coated in poison. It's always the same. I cry out, they try and take me. I fight back, they scratch me. I don't know what's in the poison, but I always fall asleep, then wake up feeling weaker than before. They're taking my strength. I know they are. They keep me in the bed they made, with the railings that stop me from leaving. But the other day, I got out of the bed. Not that it did much good. I just wanted to find my mum, to see her and hear her voice. But they caught me. I fought with everything I had, in the maze of corridors they call a home. The darkness descending, I fought and fought, but out came the claws, and I slipped into unconsciousness. It's always the same. One day, the sun was out. I was sitting up. I haven't eaten. I don't trust the food. I know I'm getting weaker, but if I give in and show weakness, this will be the end for me. They think I don't know, but I know, and I will not go down without a fight. I hear voices just outside my room. I stop and listen. Please, what's happening to him? He seems to be getting worse each day. He's refusing to eat, and he barely sleeps. We have to sedate him because he's getting more and more aggressive. He tried to abscond yesterday. At 86, he won't last much longer if he doesn't start eating and drinking. Is there anything that we can do to help? You need to look for a care home. The hospital can only do so much for him at this point, and his dementia is only getting worse. Dementia? What are these lies? And 86? I know I'm not a little boy anymore, but I certainly am not 86. I hear a gentle crying. A young woman with a tear-streaked face walks in. How are you today, Dad? She asked me softly. I don't answer. I turn away. I hear the crying pick up again. As I turn my head, I see my reflection. A withered, tired-looking face stares back. It looks like me, but it can't be. That's what the poison's doing. That's why I always feel so tired and defeated. It's aging me. This is impossible. No, this has to be a trick. A two-way mirror or something. Or some clever lighting. That's it. It has to be. There's no way I'm 86. They think I'll fall for this? I don't have a daughter. All I want is my mum. I see through the mask, her black eyes, the fake smell of perfume trying to lure me into a sense of security, making me believe I'm old and helpless. If I give in and succumb to their tricks, I'll be killed. They'll use their claws to shred me, and this trap they send in, it won't work. I worked on a farm for a guy on Craigslist. I was absolutely strapped for cash. I mean, what more can I say? I just gotten kicked out of my mother's house. Granted, I was 25 with no job. I was desperate for cash. I didn't want to be that guy working minimum wage jobs for the rest of his life. I didn't want to make enough to barely support myself. What was I to do? In hindsight, I probably should have started there and worked my way up. Like, you know, a normal person. Well, I decided I would do some freelancing. It paid pretty good, and I could pick my own jobs. I felt pretty confident that I could make enough to start getting an actual education other than a high school diploma. What better place to look than on Craigslist, right? Nope, wrong. I did it anyways though. One night while scrolling through the jobs section of Craigslist, I stumbled upon an ad for help tending a farm. It provided living quarters, free meals, and the best part, money. The ad was written by a man who said he had inherited a farm, but he was getting too old to tend to the animals and crops as efficiently as he once used to. The pay was extremely good, and I had a place to stay basically rent-free. After about 2 hours of deliberation, I decided to go ahead and send him an email. I explained I only needed this temporarily, as I was saving money for school. I told him I could be a reliable worker, but only for 6 months. I didn't really expect an answer back, as he probably wanted something longer or more permanent. It only took about 15 minutes before I received a response. I sent the email at 2 AM. I admit, I was a little off-put by the speedy reply, especially since it was the middle of the night. I figured he'd be sleeping. Anyways, the email he sent was pretty short and to the point. He explained any help was good enough, and said he'd be ready for my arrival the following day. He left the address and his phone number. The next morning, I packed everything I wanted to take, told my mother I was leaving for a job and I'd stay in contact, and headed out to the farm. When I arrived, he was nothing like I had imagined. He was tall and fairly overweight. He had a beard that wasn't quite full, but still enough to be called a beard, I guess. His eyes were dark, really dark. I could barely make out his pupils. Upon approaching him with my bags, he reached out to me. I dropped my bags and shook his hand. It felt forced. It wasn't a very friendly handshake. It was firm, almost gripping. He let go and I felt my arm fall to my side. He asked me to hurry in, so I did. He quickly showed me to my room and asked if I could start right away. Flustered, I dropped my belongings in my room and threw my phone and keys on the bed. I quickly changed my pants into jeans and put on some old shoes. I walked out to the main hall. He stood there, almost mannequin-like. When we locked eyes, he started telling me my task. I was to tend to the field 3 times a day. He said he had ploughed over the land to start anew. He was planting corn, and a lot of it. He claimed he was going to sell and distribute the corn to local grocery stores. I asked about the animals, and he said there were none. Before I could ask anything further, he cut me off and threw me a shovel. He asked me to fill in holes throughout the farm before he could till the land. I took the shovel and hurried out of the door. Staring at him was uncomfortable. I was tired. I had barely slept the night before. Hell, I had sent the email the night before. This all felt like a whirlwind, but all I thought about was the money. I knew in my gut this wasn't right, but I really needed this. The farm was huge. At the end of the field, you couldn't even see the house anymore. I know because I had to walk to the whole way through to fill in holes. Holes I never found, by the way, until the edge of the farm. It was surrounded in thick forest. I knew it was a rural area, but I didn't realize that farm was basically a one-way in and one-way out kind of deal. The forest was dense, really dense. You'd get lost in a matter of seconds if you weren't paying attention. When I reached the very end of the farm, I noticed only one hole and about 14 other already filled in holes. Why would he send me out here over a mile away to fill in one hole? I felt uneasy about the whole thing. As I started to fill in the hole, which is about 10 feet deep, I couldn't stop glancing over at the already filled in, disturbed ground. After I filled in about 2 feet worth of dirt, my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to dig into one of the already filled holes. These were not small holes. They were wide and about 12 feet in length. They were big enough to fit a deceased cow. Hell, maybe even 2. I had already figured that's what the case was, considering there weren't any animals. I'm glad I went with my gut. It didn't take much digging to reach the first, weird object. It was a wallet. I picked it up and opened it, but it was completely empty. I tossed it to the side and kept digging. That's when I saw a hint of red fabric. I couldn't tell right away what it was. It could have been an animal wrapped in a blanket. It's safe to say I was heading into denial. It was only about 4 feet down when I discovered the body. Her body was in bad shape, but she wasn't decomposing. All of the trauma she went through was clear on her skin. I knelt down and felt her body. She was cold. I sat there for a couple of minutes, just staring at her. Once I realized that her time of death had to be within the last 48 hours, I ran to the nearest tree and vomited. I didn't even bother filling in the hole I was supposed to, but I reburied the girl. Her body didn't deserve to be exposed like that. I threw the wallet into an entrance of the woods near the graves. I figured the police would find it, even if you were to try and hide the bodies better. After that, I ran. I felt like an Olympic athlete. It was starting to get dark, and I had to make it back before then, or I'd be wandering around this field for hours. The last thing I wanted was to be hunted down like an animal in the pitch black. I knew that's what he was going to do. He knew filling the hole would have taken until dark. Once I reached the house, I finally stopped to catch my breath. I knew I had to remain composed, or he would know. I regulated my breathing and walked in. He was sitting at the dining table to the left of the house. I couldn't tell what he was doing, but once he heard me open the front door, his head swung around so fast I thought he'd snap his neck. He looked at me like a deer in headlights. It was obvious he hadn't expected me back so soon.
You're done?
I could tell he was trying everything in his power to remain calm. I got sick. I had to come back. I'll go back out to finish it. I have to use the bathroom. I tried to sound as nonchalant as I could, but I knew he could tell I was lying. After looking at me up and down, he said,
Okay then, get back to it. I want it done by tonight.
I nodded my head and hurried to my room. I took the clothes I had taken off when I arrived and shoved them into my suitcase. I was so happy I hadn't unpacked. I grabbed my phone, but my keys were gone. Frantically, I started looking for them as quietly as possible. He took them. I knew it. My original plan was to run in, grab my things, and book it the hell out of there, which is pretty hard to do with no keys. I sat on the bed for a moment. My phone had no signal, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I started going through my pictures. If I was going to die, I wanted to see my friends and family one more time. Even if it was just over a phone screen, it felt like enough. That's when I stumbled upon my 23rd birthday party, when my mother had gifted me my car as a present. I stood proudly by the car, with a set of keys in each hand. I had 2 sets of keys. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier. I never used them, but I always carried them in case I locked myself out of my car. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled everything out of it. At the very bottom was my second set of keys. They must have been the first thing I threw in while packing. It was a mindless habit at that point, and in that moment, I couldn't have been more proud of myself. I decided to say, screw the clothes, and grab my phone and keys. I peeked out of the bedroom and walked to the bathroom. It wasn't hard to act ill, because I was already nauseated from sheer terror and anxiety. I tried to make over-exaggerated gagging sounds, but I eventually threw up. It wasn't my intention, but it made it more realistic. I rinsed out my mouth and stuck my phone and keys into the side of my pants. I made sure they weren't obvious and headed back out to the main area. Still sitting at the dining table, I told him I was ready to finish the work. He nodded and I walked out. I started walking towards the farm again, because when I looked behind me, he was watching me through the window. I walked slow, and once he wasn't watching anymore, I fled to my car. He heard my frantic running and bolted outside. By then, I was already in my car and pulling out. He started to sprint full speed at my car, and I floored it. I heard 2 gunshots ring out, and I felt the slight impact as one bullet shot through the passenger seat. I sped until I felt safe. It had taken me 4 hours to get there, and about 2 to get home. I immediately went to my mother's and told her everything. Turns out, there were 52 bodies discovered on the farmland when I reported what had happened to the authorities. They conducted a thorough search of the whole farm. Many missing person cases that went cold throughout the years were coming to light. The only thing they didn't find was him. I look every few months to see if they finally have a lead, but they never do. The names he had given me was fake, and the phone number was that of a burner phone. I didn't have any pictures of him. I described him to a sketch artist, and that was about it. Although, I saw online that there's a farm on the west coast. Pays well, living expenses taken care of, and free meals. It's run by some old guy who says the work is too much to handle by himself. It seems too good to be true. The similarities are eerie. I know you might need the money, but I wouldn't go if I were you.